You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show. Broadcasting live from News Talk 1400 WSTC, 1350 WNLK.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on. Call in now. 855-4-SCHIFF. That's 855-472-4433.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back. Second hour of the Peter Schiff Show. We got Robert Kramer hanging on for one more segment. You know, before I talk to Bob about Keynesian remedies for our current economic malaise, I just wanted to digress one more time back to the taxation. There's one thing, Rob, where I would agree with you on when it comes to something like a carried interest where hedge fund managers, are allowed to pay a capital gains tax rate on their carried interest in their funds where they get a 20% incentive fee. That's clearly ordinary income. It should be treated no differently than the income of their secretary. So I would agree with you there that is wrong. But you mentioned something, earlier about the dividend tax when you earn a tax on dividends. When a corporation pays a dividend, first it has to earn a profit, and it pays a corporate tax on that profit, which in the United States is very high. I think it's 35%. So even if the individual pays a 15%, he's actually paid 50% as a shareholder in that company. So I think that if we abolish the corporate income tax completely, which would be a good idea, then you would be right. Then I think there's no reason to tax dividend income any differently than wages. But right now, there's dividends are double taxed. Do you see the distinction there?
I understand your point. How would you feel about capital gains, though, which are not a function of haven't been taxed previously?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think that a wage earner should be punished or taxed higher on his labor than an investor should be on his capital. So if I use my labor, I use my labor to generate income, and somebody else uses their capital to generate income, I agree that they should both be taxed the same way.
All right, then.
But in my ideal world, they would both be taxed zero, because I don't want to tax either of that.
Okay.
I want the government to raise.
How would you pay for government?
Well, I don't want all this government. I don't want to pay for it. I want it to go away. I want to pay for a much smaller government with sales taxes, with import duties and things like that. But let me go back to the Keynesian remedies. So, reaching into your, obviously you're believing in these Keynesian remedies. What should we do now? We're in a gigantic hole. We have all this unemployment. We have, the economy, you and I agree, is not in good shape. What should the government be doing? How do we get out of this?
Well, the one thing that I think the president could have done substantially to change the trajectory of the last couple of years, I'm sure you would probably disagree with. I think at the beginning of his term, when he was at the height of his popularity and we were at the height of the crisis, he should have insisted on a substantially greater stimulus program. And I don't know if he'd have gotten it, by the way, because there were a lot of Republican members of the Senate who wouldn't go for that, something that large. I think we needed a lot more stimulus to fill the $3 trillion deficit in demand that occurred at the end of the Bush administration and leading.
So what you're thinking is that we didn't go deep enough into debt. We should have borrowed even more money.
That's correct. I mean, look. We finally got out of the Great Depression when Emperor Hirohito convinced the government to borrow enough to jumpstart the private sector of the economy.
Well, I would say that we didn't get out of the Great Depression until the Second War ended. I mean, you weren't really living in this country during the Second World War, but things were pretty bad. I mean, we were rationing goods. I mean, the quality of life for average Americans during the Second World War was not very good. It didn't start to improve until the war ended.
Average weekly pay went up 83% between 1940 and 1945 in the United States.
Yeah, but what were they able to buy with the money? War bonds. They didn't buy anything. They loaned all that money to government. You couldn't even women couldn't buy nylons. They were rationing milk.
And as a consequence, there was a lot of pent-up demand after the war that helped. But on the other hand, private sector job growth had been primed. I'm a pilot. I fly airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
You go down the runway, you can go down at 50 miles an hour, 50 knots, or 60 knots, and you never take off until you reach the takeoff speed. And that's what we need.
Well, let me ask you, all that money, right? All the money that the government spent to fight the Second World War, right? Yeah. It borrowed all that money from American citizens, right? Where would all this money that you want the government to spend to get it, who are we going to borrow it from? Because obviously American citizens are broke. So where is the government going to get all the money to finance all this stimulus spending?
Let me be very clear. Now is the time to stimulate the economy. A time of prosperity is a time to bring down.
Right, but right now, if you want the government to stimulate the economy by borrowing a lot of money, borrowing it from who?
Well, borrowing it from the international markets. You're right.
So borrowing it. So you want us to go more in debt to China and Japan? Now, what?
Wait. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should borrow money forever. I mean, in
fact, how are we going to pay it back?
My wife, Congresswoman Schakowsky, is on the Deficit Commission, and she proposed just last week a proposal to bring primary balance to the federal budget, that is, balance in every aspect but interest, by 2015, without making the middle class pay for it.
But how could you do that? If we would have done what you said, if we would have borrowed even more money, we would be even more deeply in debt than we are today. Who's going to pay it off but the middle class?
On the other hand, we'd have a lot more people working. And
how do you know that?
And we would be, well, we know that about 3.5 million jobs were saved by the stimulus program.
How do we know that? How do we know the stimulus didn't kill jobs?
Most mainstream economists agree there was about 3.5.
Well, I don't care what mainstream economists agree. These were the same idiots who in 2007 thought the economy was in great shape. These guys couldn't even see the housing bubble, even though it blew up right in their face. So I don't care what mainstream economists think. There is no proof that the stimulus saved one job. In fact, maybe it saved some jobs that we would have been better off without. Maybe it prevented better jobs from coming into place.
Look, if you spend money on construction of new infrastructure or on paying for teachers and firemen who would otherwise be laid off, you assure that there are jobs.
No, but where did that money come from? What jobs were destroyed by taking that money from the private sector to spend it on infrastructure?
You show me. Right now, I can tell you for sure that if you take money from state and local government that was going to go for teachers and firemen and policemen, that their jobs are destroyed.
No, yes, but when
that happens.
But if the government takes money from someplace in order to pay teachers, that's money that's not available to pay somebody else to do something different. There is not an infinite amount of money. You just can't create jobs by spending money.
At a point, well, no, wait. The wealth of America is created by organizing our workforce, by the actual work, the labor of the people.
No, it's created by entrepreneurs who organize land, labor, and capital to produce products. But let me ask you one key question.
Wait. Let me finish one thing, though, Peter. Right now, we have huge numbers of people who are sitting idle, who would like to work, and plant equipment that is sitting idle as well. What is truly wasted are the products, the goods and services that would have been created by those people.
Right, but what is preventing?
And that's lost forever.
But what is preventing these jobs from coming into existence?
Someone to organize the workforce.
No,
the activity.
And
there's an artificial reduction.
So who should organize it? The government?
Huh?
Who should organize it?
Well, I'm happy for the private sector to organize it, except when it can't. When it can't in a recession.
But why can't it?
It won't, because there's no demand, so people in the private sector will not invest, and the consumers are not going to go out and spend money.
Well, how can the consumers spend money when they're broke? The consumers are dead. What's preventing resources from being allocated? Wages are too high. They have to come down. The government won't let them come down. You got the minimum wage law that keeps them from coming down. The government is paying people unemployment benefits not to work. You've got all sorts of ways the government is preventing the private sector from allocating those resources. If your idea is that, well, let the government allocate them, let's adopt central government planning, let's follow a socialist model, there's no example where that succeeds.
In a context of a recession, people tend to save more.
That's what we need. We need more savings.
That's what you need in order to get out of the recession.
That's exactly what we need. I mean, we spent our way into this recession. Are you suggesting we spend our way out?
If you have more savings in a recession, you have less demand and there's less product.
No, what do you think happens to the savings? The savings are spent on capital goods. So the demand is for machinery. It's for equipment. It's to produce goods. It's to provide jobs. If we just spend the money, what are we going to buy? We're going to buy goods made in China. How's that going to help our economy?
The savings are spent on capital goods only if there's demand for entrepreneurs to spend it. And right now, as you know,
there's demand all over the world.
The sector and corporations are sitting on more cash than they have been in generations, and because there's no demand.
Let me cut to one important question. So let's assume that we do what you want to do. we borrow a bunch of money, and we actually get the economy going on all this borrowed money. How then do we pay it back? What happens when interest rates rise and interest on the national debt is $1 trillion a year, $1.5 trillion a year? How can we possibly afford to pay back the interest, let alone the principal, on all this money that you think we should borrow?
How we can afford anything is if we fully employ the people and the material and the equipment in our society to produce as much as possible. That's how we can afford anything. And the first priority is to fully utilize all of our productive capacities so that we're not wasting massive amounts of labor power and industrial capacity.
And so what you think is the government, Washington, can look at all this stuff that they think is being wasted, and these bureaucrats in Washington who have never run a business, most of them have never employed anybody, they're somehow going to figure out exactly how the pieces put into place, and they're going to succeed where the Soviets failed, where the Cubans failed, where the East Germans failed.
Characterizing what we're saying here. From the end of World War II until about 1973, our economy had the longest run of growth in its history.
Well, actually, no. The longest run of growth was between the Civil War and the First World War. That's when we had no government, really. We had a gold standard. We had no income tax. We had no Social Security tax. We had the freest markets we've ever had. We had the Industrial Revolution.
You'd like to go back to the Gilded Age here.
That was the Gilded Age. I'd like to go back to freedom. I'd like to be free like my grandparents were, not indentured. I don't like giving half my income to the government.
A senior citizen who has Social Security and Medicare to rely on is a hell of a lot more free than a senior citizen who is in poverty.
Well, the senior citizen right now who's relying on Medicare is relying on theft. He's relying on money stolen from his children and grandchildren to pay that welfare scheme. But the people who are paying the taxes are going to be, out of luck because there's no money at the end of this Ponzi scheme. I'd rather be free to save for my own retirement than have to pretend on a government-orchestrated Ponzi scheme.
Luckily, most Americans think the idea of having Social Security and Medicare is a good thing.
Well, most people, there are a lot of people who are wrong about a lot of things, and Social Security has done a lot of damage to this country, and unfortunately, we're about to realize just how much damage, just like Bernie Madoff's clients, in the end, they realized how much damage the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme did. Well, there are going to be far more victims of the Social Security Ponzi scheme than Bernie Madoff, because this is on a national scale.
Wait. Social Security is solvent for
it's not solvent at all. It's never been solvent. In fact, it's cash flow negative right now. But there's no trust fund. The whole thing is a hoax.
It's not cash flow negative right now. It
sure it
generates
is.
a surplus.
No, it doesn't. It's generating a deficit right now.
2037 with minor changes.
All right. Look. Anyway, I got a commercial coming up. You want to hold on and talk about Social Security? Otherwise, I got to say goodbye.
Okay, friend.
All right. Take care. We got more of the Peter Schiff Show to go, so don't go away.